Jane Austen, the 250th anniversary of her living. WTTW is having a special mini-series on the topic. My friend Carl is a member of the Jane Austen Society here in Chicago, and he spoke last year on Jane Austen at the Fortnightly Club. Carl told me in the locker room at the East Bank Club this week that Jane Austen never married and never had sex. 250 years ago, it was one and the same thing. If you weren't married, you'd never have the opportunity to be alone with a man. Today we have Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but in the past, there was nothing not to tell about. Welcome. Welcome to Sunday Coffee Hour. I'm Stanley Smith. At Sunday Coffee Hour, we talk about everything and nothing. This Sunday, we talked about going to the symphony with a knee replacement, having company over, playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and Vidor's Toccata. The readings at Washington National Cathedral were from Acts. God is not partial, but only a few are chosen. And from Corinthians, death comes to man and life through man by God. The gospel reading was, none of us have ascended to the Father yet. The sermon at Washington National Cathedral was by Bishop Marianne Budde. Marianne preached about the celebration of the mystery of faith. Christ is risen, and Christ will come again. We're all in the good company of disbelief. Easter is a chaotic story of confusion and grief. We don't recognize Christ until he calls us by name. It's more than a one-time event. Christ is calling our name across the lifetime of our living. It's a slow awakening. Jesus always seems to appear when we least expect it, and that's why we often don't recognize him. As soon as we do recognize him, he seems to disappear. It's a fleeting glimpse of another reality. It's the lived experience of the Christian faith. We can't pin it down as a doctrine, creed, or social justice program. God is active in the world in ways that are not our ways and not always obvious. Marianne said she's been interviewed by the press about Christianity and politics following the backlash of her inaugural message to President Trump. Easter means resurrection. Most faith traditions ascribe to some belief in life after death. But what about now? If we can alleviate pain and suffering, it's upon us to do so. But how do we do that without treading on the core belief that God alone is sovereign in the world and not us? We usually get it wrong. There's a consolation in knowing that pain and suffering will come to an end. We haven't had the lived experience of what happens after resurrection. We're trying to recreate something here on earth that we haven't experienced yet. That's why it's called faith. We're all amazed that life can go on after pain, suffering, loss, and death, but it does. We often don't live our lives that way, but it's what we experience. We want to condemn those who are not forgiving, and then the phone rings off the hook when people hear us condemning those who don't. We're not condemning those who are not forgiving. We're trying to fill the gap between our lived experience and our faith. And that's what Christ did on Easter morning. And he does it whenever we least expect it, every day of our lives. At St. James Cathedral, the sermon was by Lisa Hackney James. Lisa preached about Mary Magdalene's worst nightmare. The things we fear most often happen like a nightmare in the middle of the night. Rome does not countenance anyone who challenges the power of the state. And then our best friends betray us and hand us over to the state to be condemned and executed. We're all hiding out in the safety of nothing bad ever happens to us. Mary Magdalene is waiting for the Sabbath to be over so she can come to the tomb. It matters to be with those we grieve for. It's a simple blessing that's often denied us. Jesus is absent from the tomb. It's another loss. We're robbed of the grief of death. Lisa said there is no death that does not come with resurrection. Death can be represented by the loss of employment, security, love, and the loss of our shared values. We need to grieve them all, but often it's off to the next crisis. And then we're denied the cross of our own grieving. We want to linger in the tragedy of it all instead of celebrating the good news of the gospel. Telling the good news in the middle of the worst circumstances can be countercultural. The good news of the gospel is for the people in deep despair, and none of us want to be there. This is when Christ is most important to us. God calls us each by our name in the middle of our worst nightmare. And then we encounter the living God with us. Truth and love were not put to death on the cross. It's death that was put to death on the cross. And when we least expect it, we have seen the Lord. I ran into Julie Roberts this week on Michigan Avenue. She said she doesn't go to church anymore because it became too political. Motivational speaker Jordan Peterson says we all need to engage in our future authory, writing our own story, but often it seems it writes itself. He says we also need to experience our worst nightmare and then move on. In my conversations with computer coding experts, they tell me that artificial intelligence can only put together what is fed into it. When you tell people it's not intelligent, it's a trigger because for some reason the general public is fixated on the idea that artificial intelligence is going to figure it all out for us. We're kind of threatened and comforted by this at the same time. The reason it's a trigger is that it points to the idea that we're probably not all that intelligent either. We simply put together stuff that's been fed into us. Over time, we codify it into beliefs, which are often based on erroneous or incomplete information to begin with. We spend a lot of time defending our beliefs to ourselves and to others. Programmers tell me it's best not to use words like please or thank you with AI because it's more likely you'll get an erroneous response. It's best to be very stern and demanding with AI in order to get the best results. None of us want to be unkind. We need to experience our worst nightmare and then offer a response that is loving, and there's nothing erroneous or unintelligent about that. If you would like to join us at Sunday Coffee Hour, Sunday Coffee Hour is every Sunday at 12 noon Central Time on Zoom. I will include my email in the description of this video. Be happy to send you an invitation. I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.